and London City is facing dozens of difficulties as all of the country is focused on World War II. A large number of citizens are hiding in a tunnel with hopes that until the war ends, they will stay alive by hiding underneath it. Among those individuals is a young girl, Eve, who is a teacher by profession. She is totally against this violence and wants the betterment of the country. But there is one thing that upsets her a lot. The thought of what will happen to kids who have lost their parents because of this disastrous war. The teacher's instinct leads her to gather multiple orphan children, and among them is a little boy, Edward, who doesn't speak a single word after being traumatized by seeing his parents shot in front of him, although he communicates by writing down what he wants. Together with them, she is on the train to Crith and Gifford, where they will stay at the same cursed house, Eel Marsh. Unfortunately, they are not lucky enough to know the terrifying past of this house. While traveling, Eve finds a handsome young man named Harry in the same traveling cabin. To her luck, he begins conversing with her. He tells her that he is a pilot and is also traveling to Crith and Gifford because of his military transfer. They both enjoy a good time, and soon the destination arrives, which puts their conversation to a halt. But before parting ways, they both exchange addresses, and Harry tells Eve that he will soon visit her. Dr. Rhodes receives the children and Eve and starts to drive toward Eel Marsh. Surprisingly, Dr. Rhodes's car gets a flat tire, and he asks Eve for a few minutes as he changes the tire. Eve, new to the city, decides to explore Crith and Gifford as it's entirely new to her. She walks a little distance when suddenly a strange old blind man interrupts her. He grabs her and starts to communicate in a different language. The old man's grab out of the blue is a jump scare for Eve, and she flees and runs back. To her relief, Rhodes is ready to go, and finally they reach Eel Marsh. Eel Marsh house is creepier than Eve expected it to be, and it is surely giving the vibes that it is cursed. But because of the financial problems, they have to live in it, no matter how awkward and scary it gets. After making arrangements for the kids, Eve goes to sleep, where she experiences a horrific nightmare. She sees that she is in an operation theater, where her baby is born, and she has to give her baby up in a terrifying sight. Therefore, she wakes up in a state of fear and realizes that a rumbling sound is coming from upstairs. Curiosity gets the best of her, and she goes up to see what's happening. She finds no one there, but some words are written on the wall that are enough to give her a bad feeling. "You let her go," are the words written on the wall. Eve has no clue as to who wrote it, and most importantly, why it was written. The next morning, two bullies set their eyes on Edward, and they lock him in a room after snatching his painting. Moreover, this is the same room in which Janet. Nevertheless, Edward at first pleads to let him out by shaking the door, but the bullies don't, and after a few minutes, Edward stops shaking it, and it gets really quiet inside the room. Eve gets to know about this, and she rushes to open the door. Upon opening the door, she finds Edward quietly sitting in the room, staring at the corner. Eve finds this strange, but she ignores it, and when she picks up Edward, she sees something even stranger, which is a doll that Edward has found. It is a creepy old black-haired doll, a doll anyone would hate, including Eve. Eve is busy serving the children lunch, and much to her surprise, Harry comes to visit her. She quickly ends her duty so she can have a good talk with him. But as soon as they start their conversation, one of the staff reminds Eve about her class, which she has to take right away. Hearing this, Eve heads toward the class and Harry towards base camp, both feeling a sense of loneliness from the inside. But on the way back, a suspicious event occurs. Harry, while crossing the lake, gets nervous, and it feels like he is scared of it. Harry has no clue why he is feeling that way. Eve isn't able to get the image of that doll out of her mind, and asks Edward again what happened, but to her shock, Edward writes down the same words she saw on the wall upstairs and walks away. A frightened Eve goes to bed. Eve feels worried when she thinks about Edward always carrying around that rotten doll. It doesn't feel right to her. That night, one of the boys who bullied Edward, Tom, gets drawn out of the house by the woman in black. Eve discovers Tom's body on the beach, badly hurt by barbed wire. She feels scared and sad at the same time, knowing that the evil presence that has been haunting them has taken another life. Rhodes, in utter disappointment, comes to take away the body, and Eve takes this opportunity to tell him that she feels some sort of paranormal activity at the house, and something evil is also there. She tries to explain it to him, but Rhodes denies every single thing, and says that all of this is nothing more than a myth. He tells her that it would be better if Eve takes good care of the kids, instead of wasting her time on these stories. Sometime later, Harry arrives at Eel Marsh, and finds Eve under great stress. She tells Harry about the accident, and about the way she feels the presence of another soul in the house. Therefore, Harry believes her words, and gives a piece of advice, that they both should search the room in which Edward was locked. At the start of the search, Eve finds a key that she thinks might lead to something important. She tries to open different shelves with it, but all attempts are unsuccessful. In between all of this, Eve finds it very mysterious that the floor beneath Edward's bed is broken. She takes it as a coincidence, and continues her search. Meanwhile, Harry finds a tape recording that turns Eve's doubt about the house into reality. It is Alice's recording, in which Harry could hear Alice saying that Janet took her after Nathaniel's passing, and now Janet's spirit is terrorizing her by making her remember him through her dreams. After listening to this recording, Harry realizes the real reason for Alice's, and he rushes to Eve to tell her about the horrific event that took place in Eel Marsh. Eve gets shocked, and she remembers the strange blind man who grabbed her while coming to Eel Marsh. She feels that he must know more about this, and she quickly departs with Harry towards the rural areas to find him. During the journey, Harry once again gets scared after he sees a lake nearby. Eve notices this strange behavior and immediately asks him what's wrong. Harry opens up to Eve and reveals that he once was on a training routine with his other military mates, when due to some technical faults, the plane crashed into a lake. Harry tried his best to save his friends, but he couldn't, and he is the only survivor among them. He was greatly traumatized by this accident, and he fears the lake now. Remembering this painful event is very hard for him, and it takes a toll on him every time. After dropping Eve at the village, he returns to the camp base. Eve walks by different houses, but the house of a man named Jerome catches her attention, as the symbol outside the house resembles the key which she found earlier. Little does she know that Jerome had locked his daughter in his basement, and she perished by being and the house caught fire mysteriously. Eve searches the old house and uses her key to open up different boxes. Surprisingly, one of the boxes unlocks and she finds a little paper in it. She tries to read it, but something terrifying happens. That same creepy old man appears out of nowhere and tries to strangle Eve, saying that because of her, Janet is back, because Janet only murders those who she sees. A terrified Eve fights back and somehow sets herself free from the creepy old man. She runs outside with the hopes of finding some help, and to her luck, she sees Harry's car coming towards her. She tells him to quickly drive away, and Harry regrets leaving her alone in the woods. However, Eve decides to read the old note, and after reading it, she gets to know the story more in detail. The letter is written by Janet to Jerome, who was her lawyer. In the letter, Janet is commanding him to give this letter to Nathaniel after he grows up, and in the letter, Janet has explained how Alice is childless and in reality, Nathaniel is her real biological son. The saddening thing is that the day after this letter was written, Nathaniel passed away. Meanwhile, at Eelmarsh, a girl notices something unusual. She sees that Edward is holding the same drawing in his hands which Tom took away from him. This confuses her, and she asks Edward how he got this drawing back and who gave it to him. But same as before, Edward stays quiet. A few minutes later, Jean, one of the staff members, sees that the same girl who questions Edward is wrapped. She is about to ask her why she was trying to. But at this moment, Eve reaches Eelmarsh and immediately pleads to all of them to leave, as it could result in the loss of their lives. Jean denies it, even after Eve explains everything to her. Eve gets extremely upset, and she opens up with Harry and tells him about her painful past accident. She tells him that she also had a child when she was young, but the doctors took that child away from her, saying that she was too young to give a child a good living and didn't have a husband. Thus, the kid was given to someone else, and she tried to find it but she wasn't successful. This is the reason Eve thinks Janet wants to harm her for giving her child away. They are busy in their talks when they notice that the girl who tried to commit a few minutes ago is missing. They begin searching for her and find her in a heart-wrenching condition. The girl is wearing a toxic gas mask and has taken. The horrifying incident of two children filled everyone's mind with fear and apprehension. They all come to a unanimous decision to leave and set off toward Harry's base camp. While they depart, Eve snatches the unsettling old doll from Edward's grasp and throws it away. Upon arriving at the base camp, a shocking revelation emerges, a startling realization that this camp is nothing more than a deceptive disguise constructed to mislead German planes. This revelation shocks Eve a great deal, leading her to question Harry's true identity. She abruptly stops him from getting closer and rudely demands to know who he is. Harry, consumed by sadness, discloses that he was once a proud pilot, but following a crash, he faced severe criticism and demotion to a lower rank. He reveals that he is the only one who was transferred here. Harry admits that he kept this information hidden from Eve because he didn't want her to perceive him as useless or a failure. Eve reluctantly absorbs this harsh reality and forcefully decides to stay at Harry's residence for the night. She resolves that they will all catch the first train to London the following day. As they gather in the basement of Harry's house, preparing to leave, Eve is taken aback to see Edward holding the creepy old doll once again, and the more chilling thing is that they are in the new place, and she threw the doll near Eelmarsh. She wonders how he found it, leaving her deeply unsettled. The unanswered questions surrounding the strange doll's reappearance begin to terrify Eve. The reappearance of the strange doll makes it evident that Janet has been following them all along. The group forms a circle and begins praying for their safety, sensing Janet's presence. Suddenly, Eve feels a chilling sensation and looks to her side, only to witness the ghostly form of Janet standing in the corner, fixated on them. Panic ensues as everyone in the house starts screaming, and Janet launches a vicious attack on them. Amidst the chaos, Eve is pushed and falls, hitting her head, causing her to lose consciousness. Edward, in a state of panic, rushes out of the house, with Harry chasing after him. They are met with a shocking sight. The base camp is engulfed in flames while heavy rain pours down. Without hesitation, Edward runs and leaps into the fiery area. Harry, completely shocked by the unfolding events, informs the rest of the group that Edward is gone, leaving them devastated. However, Eve abruptly regains consciousness and seizes the painting that Edward had been holding, examining it closely. She asserts that Edward is not gone, and swiftly retrieves the keys to Harry's car, embarking on a journey back to Eelmarsh. Upon her arrival, she rushes towards the very room where Janet tragically took. As soon as she steps inside, the door slams shut, trapping Eve inside. Eve tries to open the door, but fails. She looks through the window and sees that Edward is walking towards the same lake in which Nathaniel drowned. Upon seeing this, she somehow breaks the wall and runs to save Edward. Edward has stepped into the lake. He is fully in possession of Janet and is following her instructions. This is where he hears the scream of Eve, who is right behind him, and he gets back to his senses. Therefore, he screams for help. Eve, without thinking twice, jumps into the lake to save him. But Janet won't let her go easily, and she grabs both Eve and Edward, dragging them deep into the lake. Eve realizes this, and she pulls Edward closer and is ready to accept her fate, but Harry jumps into the lake and pushes them both away. He makes Janet release Edward and Eve at the expense of it. He sacrifices his and Eve and Edward get out safely, but Harry has fallen into Janet's trap. Eve, in a great state of sadness, cries her heart out, but sadly, Harry's soul won't return. Months have passed, and Eve has warmly welcomed Edward into her life, now residing together in the blissful city of London as World War II has ended. They have found peace in the belief that they have finally escaped the possession of the vengeful spirit. Edward now speaks and resides happily with Eve. Out of curiosity, Edward asks Eve about Janet's spirit, and to this, Eve replies that Janet's spirit has left them and will not follow them again. Therefore, there is no need to be scared anymore. To have a refresher, they leave their home, but the moment Edward and Eve leave, the photo frame of Harry and his friends, which Eve has kept in memory of Harry, cracks, and the reflection of Janet's soul appears, giving the ultimate twist that she hasn't left them and will continue her paranormal activities.